All right, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar lined up for you today, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience, so if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speaker, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use that question and answer tab right there on your interface and submit your questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a very interactive chat feature, so I do encourage you, if you have a question, comment, suggestion, whatever you want to send over to us, please do via that chat interface. I'll keep an eye on it, and we'll get hopefully we'll get some really interesting chats in. We also do have a polling question during today's webinar, so please keep an eye out for that. We'll definitely let you know when that pops up on your screen. And at the end of today's webinar, as I did say, after the question and answer period, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Cloud Cost Optimization, Creating a Smart Commitment Purchasing Strategy. Our speaker today is Patrick Gartland, who is the General Manager of Cloud FinOps at Spot by NetApp. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me today. Really, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for making the time today to join us. With that, we'll go ahead and dive right in. So Spot, obviously we were acquired by NetApp last year, and we have over 1,500 customers using our products, just to give a quick background, all the way varying industries, varying requirements. The goal here is really to show that we can solve a lot of different needs, regardless of any specific things that might be for your company or requirements that you might have. Excuse me. We also do a lot to fit in everywhere in kind of the DevOps lifecycle. We can do a lot with deployment, to saving, to finance, to reporting, kind of everything you need to run workloads, be able to report on that, and then save as much money as you possibly can. Likewise, monitor those workloads, make sure that they are running, make sure that you have the uptime you're looking for. We also provide a lot of SLAs with the different products we have. And I'll give a quick overview of the 2 other products before we do a deep dive into Eco. What we look at and what Spot covers. You have on-demand costs, which obviously you can go launch everything you want today, run it on demand. You can turn it off whenever you want. It does cost more, and you can go up. There's no commitment. Go for it and run whatever you need, however often you want. You have reserved capacity, reserved instances, savings plans. You are committed on those, but you do get a very good discount, especially for a lot of steady state workloads. And then we have spot VMs, preemptible VMs that you can use where you get a very big discount. You do have no SLA from the cloud providers, and you have to make sure that your workloads can handle interruptions, and you have the infrastructure built around it. What we've done with a lot of with the products that that Spot offers, we have Elastigroup and Ocean. Elastigroup is really going to help you make sure you're running your workloads on Spot, any type of auto scaling, preempt the market. So if we see interruptions coming, make sure that we either change the instance type or revert to on-demand, whatever we need to do to make sure that we keep that uptime. We also provide an SLA around it. Likewise with Ocean, that's really getting your containers to run on Spot instances, a very common one, Kubernetes, and making sure that you're running on the most efficient types you possibly can, so constantly right-sizing them based on memory and CPU requirements, but likewise, making sure that we're monitoring the market so that we can move things around and keep your uptime as high as it normally would be with, say, on-demand. Likewise, if we do see interruptions, moving things on to on-demand or taking over reserved instances, whatever we have to do to make sure that your workloads are running on the cheapest infrastructure possible based on the current market conditions. So just to give a quick overview on the other two products that Spot has, our goal is to basically address any time in your workload's lifecycle, from Spot, on demand, to reserve, to savings plans, and make sure that you're extracting the most value or the most savings you possibly can, regardless of how you want to run your workloads. Likewise, we do have Cloud Analyzer, and that's going to give a lot of analysis on what you're running today, where we see the opportunity to save, give you some kind of one-click buttons to go and get things running. But it's a great way to start and just kind of see where you are and what the opportunity is to save on the cloud. Excuse me. So getting into Eco, which we'll dive into for the most of this presentation, this is where Ocean and Elastic Group are dealing with the Spot kind of life cycle and running instances, are running your workloads on Spot instances. We're going to be dealing with more of the RI, savings plan, and financial management for any other workloads. So again, the whole goal here is to run as little as possible on demand and make sure that no matter what your requirements are, no matter what the workload types are, we're finding cheaper ways for you to be able to run them. Now, one thing that I want to be clear on is that it's not either or. I'd say the vast majority of our customers are using both. There's certain workloads that are great for Spot. You get the maximum Spot discount. There's no commitments. Maybe for some, there's temporary stuff running on demand. And then for everything else, we'll get RIs or savings plans to make sure that you're saving the most. So just to kind of visualize this, but make sure everyone understands that it's not either or. There's great ways to work between both of them. And this way you get the most amount of savings possible across all of the workloads that you have. All right. I'm sorry, before we dive into it, I think what we'll do is a quick poll just to try and get an idea of where everyone is today.
All right, the polling question should be coming out to you right now. The question is, how much reserved instance or savings plan underutilization have you had in the last 6 months? So you can choose from none, some, a lot, or I have no idea. The polling question should be up on your screen now, so hopefully we can get folks engaged with this one. And while we're waiting for the responses to come in, just a quick reminder that there's plenty of time to get questions in too for the question and answer period. So if at any time during Patrick's presentation you have a question for him, please, you don't have to wait for the question and answer period. You can go ahead and submit your question at any time. All right, I'm going to give the polling question about 10 more seconds open, and then I'll close it out. We'll take a look at the results, and then Patrick, you can get right back to your presentation. So, excuse me. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it out here in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right. Poll is now closed. Again, the question was, how much reserve instance or savings plan underutilization have you had in the last 6 months? Looks like the majority of folks, or the largest number of folks, 42% said they had some, and then which was seconded only by a lot at 25%, and then 21% said none, 13% said they have no idea. So what do you think of these results there, Patrick?
It's actually good that not as many people had no idea. That means you're taking a look at it. I would say it's a little bit bad that you had some or a lot. So that is definitely something we'll talk about today on how to prevent that. For the people who have none, that's great. There's probably, how could we increase the coverage, make sure that we're not missing anything or being too conservative is one way to look at it. But thank you for responding. That's good to know kind of where the audience is and what are some places that we can make sure we're focusing on for this presentation. Okay, so diving into it. For Eco, what we are focused on is really taking savings to the next level and trying to extract as much as we possibly can from what is available to us. We do a lot with the RM marketplace. We have our own internal marketplace on how we make sure that we can move things around when utilization changes. And we also have a new product called Eco Flex, which helps us manage things with savings plans. The overarching theme, though, here is to see how not only what active RI management or savings plan management does, but kind of going over, how would you look at certain things? What are the pros and cons of different types of RIs, savings plans, things that you need to make sure you're paying attention to if you're looking at this data or want to learn more about it. So we'll go ahead and dive in right now. Just to kind of level set, typically what we see is that a lot of companies or individuals, once you get that extra zero or that extra comma in your bill, you're going to have a knee-jerk reaction of, hey, we either need to turn stuff off, we need to do right-sizing events, we have to cut the costs because it went over some budget or it hit some number where now it gets on someone's radar, and that's generally not something you want. Usually what you're going to do is you're going to start off getting some, say from Cost Explorer, looking at recommendations, doing some pivot tables, some VLOOKUPs, trying to understand, okay, which team is using what, who is doing what, how often are they going to be doing this. Generally, we see everyone is 6 months away from right sizing or releasing a new version or changing instance types. Sometimes that 6 months turns into 12 months or forever. So you're constantly battling either a changing landscape where people are taking advantage of the latest and greatest, and one of the benefits of the cloud of being able to change your instance types or change your workload types, whatever you want to do. Versus the, things do get delayed, we can't commit, we're not sure, kind of the uncertainty of how long they're going to be using things. But the idea here is that a lot of companies will spend the time doing this, talk to the teams, and the goal is, okay, we've done all of our homework, we should get savings. Now, typically what we see is that this is the tip of the iceberg as far as how much work is concerned. It's something where you do that first batch of analysis, and that's really where then you have to keep monitoring. You have to keep looking at what else can we do here? How else can we further optimize? What team did their migration 2 months early or 3 months late? That you need to take into account for, and how do you manage that or plan for something that far in the future? Now, there's a couple different ways to do that. You can go very conservative and get a very low coverage rate. Make sure that you're not overcommitting at all. In that scenario, we see a lot of companies, you'll kind of miss out on, say, $20,000 a month of savings to avoid, say, wasting $1,000. That's where you kind of have to weigh the pros and the cons. Sometimes a little bit of underutilization can be a good thing, as long as it's not chronic, just depending on what your workload types are. Likewise, if you go too aggressive and stuff does turn off, we'll show some screenshots from the console from some of the customers who came talking to us, where you can get stuck in a situation where you have commitments that you simply can't get rid of. Maybe the workload isn't coming back, or you did a right sizing event that end up costing you more in the long run. So that's where it can be a delicate balance of trying to figure out what exactly works best for your scenario. Now, typically when it comes to, we talked about it's a lot of work. The ongoing work is where we see a lot of issues pop up. Generally, no one's job is to come in every day and look at coverage and utilization, what's expiring, how much they should be getting. No one's bonus is ever decided by how many RIs they bought that year. And also, regardless of what UIs are out there, generally you end up getting to Excel in one way or the other. And that is not where people in the cloud area want to spend a lot of time, right? That's not also their value add. It's, what new products can we ship? How do we get stuff deployed faster versus trying to do exports and pivot tables and look things up. It can be a frustrating task. I would say a lot of the people we talk to, they have RIs today, they are doing it, and they want to get rid of it. They want to get rid of that responsibility or that workload. They want to be able to focus their time elsewhere. Likewise, if you are managing or coming into something that has a lot of existing things to manage, that can be almost a job in itself to kind of right the ship or fix underutilization before you even get to the ongoing work that constantly comes through, or the stuff that you need to make sure you're focused on. Excuse me. One thing we've done with Eco is make it a a fully managed service so that you don't have to spend time on it. You don't have to do anything beyond, you don't have to do any homework, so to speak. Maybe answer a couple questions on where utilization is or usage is going. But the goal is you'd have 5 or 10 minutes a month to spend on it. Look at some savings data, probably answer a couple questions. But the goal is that you do spend your time where you want to or where you're going to have the most value wherever you are within your company. So just on a side note, this is what we do. We are focused on it 100% all day, every day, trying to get as much savings as we possibly can for our customers. But today I'll also go into, just some details around what to look at, how to kind of think about things, if you do want to dive into the details. That being said, one thing with Eco, it's 100% performance-based. So it's based on how much savings we're able to get you. So this is where if you do look at, say, Cost Explorer, it's going to say, if you got 100% coverage today, this is how much you could save. Obviously, that's probably not going to be reality 12 months or 36 months down the road because workloads will change, things will go underutilized, things will expire. So it's really making sure you're focused on, okay, how much savings am I getting each month? Not just what is the projected savings or what is a nice report saying, here's my 3-year savings. I want to get savings today, and I want to see it kind of on a monthly basis or even a daily basis if you want. Now, going into the details on this, reserved instances and even savings plans, that's, I'm assuming everyone's familiar with that. It launched, almost 2 years ago now. They seem simple, especially savings plans were definitely brought on as is something that solves all the problems. You click a button and boom, you're done. This is where I talk about the screenshots. This was someone we were talking to after the fact. This is from 2020, and I actually need to get the full year's chart in here, but they bought it. They were in an industry that was affected. They saw a very, very large drop in usage. Likewise, they turned off a bunch of things, and you can see that they lost a ton of money on this savings plan. So that's where it can work, but you have to be very careful and make sure you don't get stuck in a situation where you have something you can't get rid of or offload if usage changes. Now, that doesn't always mean, hey, the next COVID or something is going to cause this. We see a lot of times you do a right sizing event, or maybe you start running things a little bit more efficiently, or you do a big migration to containers and your workloads just get naturally more dense or more efficient. That alone can drop your usage in areas and drop your usage where savings plans would cover things, where your workloads, though, in AWS are still roughly the same or growing, but the amount of hardware you need to actually run it drops significantly. Now, you do have a lot of different options for savings plans. You have 1 year, no upfront, all the way to 3-year, all the way upfront. Obviously, if it was as simple as, hey, we'll pay everything all upfront for 3 years, maximize the discount, I don't think we'd be having this discussion. But in reality, that is not usually the best way to go. We have seen people attempt it, but in the end, it usually ends up giving you a much lower actual savings rate once you factor in things that have gone unused over that length in time. The other piece, you do give up a bit of a savings rate with savings plans and convertibles. They do have their place depending on what your specific use cases are. What we also see, though, is people trying to do EC2 instant savings plans to get that savings plan simplicity, but to get that higher savings rate. In reality, we see kind of limited use cases for this. If you're used to Linux RIs, you're going to get a lot of the same benefit with a standard RI, and you can sell it. If you have a lot of Windows instances where you're changing between family sizes within a family, that's probably the most common use case for it. But again, you can't sell it if for whatever reason you want to switch families or something like that. So we actually see limited areas that we deploy it. It doesn't mean that they're useless. It's far from, but there's very specific workloads they're for. If you, like I said, most people, you're going to have a pretty good amount of Linux workloads. We strongly suggest using standard RIs for that because you do have that option to get rid of them. if you need to, and you already get that size flexibility baked in. The only other use case for that, if you are switching between shared and dedicated tenancy, that is a valid use case for them. Honestly, we don't see that very often, so that's why we say it's limited as far as what you'd really want to use these for. The other piece, just on this, we do see a lot of people using the 1-year savings plans, no upfront. It's a very short time commitment. You do get savings pretty quickly. Generally, we see a lot of opportunity left on the table. Maybe 60 or 70, 80% more savings can be achieved over that without any loss in flexibility. So it can be definitely an easy way to get going. Generally, we see people when it comes to renewal time or after they get a bit more mature, they do want to kind of be a little bit more aggressive and see what we can do or see what they can do to maximize that savings or to bump that savings number up a bit. Excuse me. All right. Sorry, had to get to the next one. Now, the RI marketplace. So this AWS has the RI marketplace. You do need a bank account to be able to sell there, US bank account specifically, but it is a way for you to offload any RIs that you're not using. Now, it is public. There's no one out there to force anyone to buy it, but you can either sometimes find decent deals, or if you do list something, hope that someone buys it. Now, you have no control whether someone will buy it, today, tomorrow, next week, next month. So you have to make sure, or that is just one risk you have to take into account when you want to think of your RI strategy or how much you're going to get or of certain types. We scan this thousands and thousands of times a day to find the best deals. We do a lot with short-term RIs. We find ones that give slightly better discounts. And this is really where, to build an effective strategy, you want to have something besides what we would call off-the-shelf RIs straight from Amazon. You want to have that X factor, be able to bring in something that, maybe you are doing that right-sizing event in 3 or 6 months, or you're doing the migration. Let's find something short-term so that we can get that coverage for that time period while not being stuck with something that you don't need as soon as you actually do that migration. We do see a lot of deals gone very, very quickly. That's why we put a lot of effort into acting on those very quickly. If you are looking through it manually, it can be a bit cumbersome, but that is something you can do to just look for the third party and see kind of what options are there. Likewise, if you are selling on the marketplace, making sure you are listing it for the correct price of, what is the remaining value of it. One thing that Eco does, generally speaking, is that we are able to sell and buy. So because of the scale that we're at, if someone needs to get rid of something, we can immediately look, okay, who else might need that? So when it gets listed on the marketplace, maybe it gets bought 30 seconds later. And that way we can look at this from a very different scale than one company looking at it just internally. We're able to look across hundreds of companies, probably hundreds of millions of dollars of AWS spend. It's something where you get to tap into a much larger community and not be reliant on someone else going in and buying something. We can actually do the selling and the buying almost immediately. So it gives a very different perspective, and it allows us to be a lot more aggressive with what we're getting based on where the liquidity is or what our other customers are using. We do have a lot of stats on the marketplace. I think we have data going back almost 6 years now. So we know exactly, what is going to sell, how much it sells for, how often it sells for in the marketplace. And that's where you can use that very effectively to craft strategies around what you want to do. And just to kind of put that in perspective, Tokyo, it's a great region, it's huge. The amount of marketplace activity is significantly smaller than even like Ireland, or Oregon or Ohio, definitely less than Virginia, which is AWS's biggest region. So you can take that into account as to what kind of options you're using or what factors or risk factors you want to take on when trying to decide which RIs you should get. And again, if you're weighing the RI versus savings plan, RIs do give that higher savings rate. In some areas, it's very significant. So that's where you generally want to try and go with that where you can to capture that higher savings rate. But you do have to have the ability and pay close enough attention to make sure you're managing it effectively. I do put on here the best find that we ever did. Someone listed an RI, a very expensive one, and missed a 0 on the price. It was something that we were able to pick up. That one purchase alone, I think they obviously, this person was an eco customer. I think it paid for the eco service for 3.5 years. Just that one purchase on how much more savings we were able to get. It was in the high 6 figures over a 3-year period. So just to put that in there, obviously we call it gold because you're not going to get it every day, but sometimes some small purchases here and there can make a night and day difference when it comes to your overall savings. Now, we've talked a lot about the different types. This is where, if you think of a stock portfolio or a retirement portfolio, we use a lot, everything that AWS has to offer to maximize the savings. A common question we get is, why would you get convertible RIs when there's savings plans? There are very valid use cases for those, depending on what your workloads are going to be or what your strategy in certain regions might be. We do focus, though, on having a very high amount of this to be sellable. Now, this is roughly the strategy that we've had since day one. This played off in spades when COVID came around. We have a lot of customers in the airline industry, hotel industry, the event space, ticketing industry that were obviously very much affected. I think we were able to get all of them back to 100% utilization within about 10 days. And you're talking about customers who spend millions and millions of dollars on AWS monthly, who saw 30, 40, 50% drops in usage over a 2-week time period. Likewise, that screenshot I showed you earlier, very similar industry, and they could not do anything to get rid of what they had. So that's where they got stuck paying for stuff when they had no use for it. And it just kind of compounds the problem where you're trying to save money, turn something off, or do right sizing, but you can't actually recognize all of the savings because you're slightly overcommitted. We do focus a lot on getting things from the marketplace, making sure that we can build a very strong foundation whenever we would start. We take, say, 4 to 6 weeks to ramp up. And this is not because it takes 4 to 6 weeks to, say, hit the buy button, so to speak. But we want to find all the different types of RIs we can, different lengths, different types, different upfront payment amounts, different deals, so that we have a lot of RIs expiring each and every month, baked into the strategy from day one, so that, say, usage did change or you wanted to change from M5 to M6G, we might have 20% of that expiring in the next 2 weeks, and the rest we can sell off. So we bake in a lot of flexibility from day one in all of the strategies that we come up with. Likewise, we will have, if you've ever looked at the Cost Explorer EC2 recommendations, we'll actually have a different strategy for each recommendation on there based on a lot of the scale that we're at in different areas, where we see usage, what your historical usage is about, what plans you'd have in the future. So at any given company, we have 50 to 100 strategies running in parallel based on that feedback and based on what we see in the data. Now, that's also something, if you do want to run it yourself, I'd strongly suggest looking at it that way. It's, one size fits all. It has some pros in the simplicity, but the cons are you generally end up leaving a good amount of savings on the table by not taking that extra step. Now, it does mean extra time, extra work. So you just have to weigh the pros and the cons, but that's how we approach every option for saving money we can. EcoFlex. So this is a product we came out with about 6-7 months ago. What we do is it allows buying and selling of savings plans. We are able to bring on some 3-year savings plans, and we use these to really fill the gaps. So we want to stick with as many standard RIs as we possibly can because you do get that higher savings rate. And given our scale, we are able to basically have as much liquidity there as you would with a savings plan without giving up that savings rate or having that penalty for the flexibility with savings plans or convertible RIs. You do have zero commitment on it. It is a great way to, if you have certain use cases like Black Friday is a common one, or launching a product where you need some very short-term coverage, but you don't want to say commit to a certain type. This is the thing that we use to help cover that, and then keeps them on there to handle the spiky workloads. Or a very common use case is dev or QA is spinning up environments here and there to run something or test something. Might be a very expensive environment, seeing what we can do to help cover that, even though it is short term. So it adds a lot of flexibility to your commitment strategy. But it also, like I said, helps really fill the gaps of where even convertibles or standard RIs just don't necessarily provide the best benefit there. But again, we're going to keep that in the 5-10% range of your overall portfolio, and really try and push getting the higher savings rates from the standard RIs. Now, I put this in here. I apologize. I do need to update this for the last couple months, but the point here, this was a very long-term customer. We started in March of 2019. I think in the first 2 weeks, the middle of March, we were able to kind of double their savings based from the previous month. The first full month we were there, I think we tripled or quadrupled the amount of savings that they were getting. And I put this in here because you can see we have grown with the customer. Each month, as their usage grows, we are continuously adding more. Now, I also like to show that this is very realistic. Not every month is better than the last. Some months it actually does go down. If you look at June 2020, that's when they were kind of affected by COVID and had to turn a bunch of stuff off. Savings went down a decent amount. We were able to pick back up the following month once they started launching things again, and stay in lockstep with them as they actually saw their online stuff grow tremendously last summer. And then as they kept going, as that kept going up, making sure that we are adding coverage as it's needed. So this is where, again, each month isn't going to be perfect, but no one would argue with this trend, especially at a very, very high coverage ratio. You know, we're talking 90+%. And that's really where you do want to tackle this. It is a constant thing you always want to be looking at, especially maintaining that very high coverage ratio. Can be a bit time consuming, but it can pay off over the long run. That being said, you have to put in the time, the effort, the strategies to make sure it does pay off. This customer specifically, one question we get asked, they actually did not have any savings plans, I think, until the beginning of this year sometime. This was all done with standard RIs, standard and convertible RIs. So that is where you do get a lot of benefit. There's no reason to not look at that to try and capture that higher savings rate, and have that flexibility baked in so that you can recover from any kind of shifts in usage, planned or otherwise. Let's see here. Okay, so I want to do a quick demo on the dashboard. One thing just on Eco's dashboard, just to take into account, we try and make this as simple as possible and focus on, okay, how do we start getting the savings right away? One thing that Eco does show short, medium, long-term, kind of average strategy length. I will say we see this less as a big topic going forward. We're able to even get all long-term, but maintain that flexibility. If anything turns off in 2 or 3 months, we can get rid of it. Likewise, if you were rolling it yourself, you could have that marketplace and listings in the marketplace. If you wanted to get those 3-year RIs, use them for a couple months and then sell them. Again, there's no guarantee you can get rid of it, so you just have to take that into account, the risk reward. But the goal here is to show, a very simple approach to getting the savings, making a decision, and then start seeing the bill drop or start seeing the savings roll in as quickly as we possibly can. Now, going back to the very first question we asked the poll around underutilization, one thing that is actually very common that we see is someone was running with the RIs, they're managing it, doing a great job. They left, they got promoted or switched jobs or functions, something came up. And before people realize it, a couple months have passed and you get a lot of waste. We define waste as just RIs you've paid for or you're paying for that have zero utilization or less than 100%. So you're basically paying money for nothing is what it boils down to. We pay very close attention to that. We try and keep that number as small as we possibly can. We've seen customers come in where the waste was almost more than their savings on a given month, and it was in the 6 digits on a monthly basis. And that's kind of free compute that you're giving up, because if those RIs were, well, sold off and new ones bought or converted, you'd be able to run other workloads with something that you're already paying for. So that's why I asked that question in the very beginning, making sure that people are paying for it. Whether you want to talk to us or not, we say don't buy Jeff Bezos another rocket. He has plenty of rockets. Try and keep all that you can, maximize the savings, and get your bill as low as you possibly can in AWS. The other piece on this is we do show dashboards, showing savings, where you're getting your savings from. So trying to show a unified front that doesn't really, it's not very, well, they don't have it in the AWS console today. Where you're getting your savings from, what you have today versus what you're going to get tomorrow. I do show this commitment over time chart very purposely. This customer, we have a very high coverage ratio. You can see that each month, the coverage is dropping down. So this was, I think the screenshots from about 3 months ago, June, kind of right at the peak. In the very next month, they have maybe 15 or 20% expiring. And each month after that, you see a drop. And that is by design. We want to be renewing stuff just in time. So when things expire, we'll renew it. And again, we're talking about baking in flexibility. Very little of this customer's commitment is longer than 12 months from when the screenshot was taken. There is definitely stuff that hits that 3-year mark, but it is very minimal compared to where you are. So a very common thing is, well, how are we supposed to, or how we don't want to be committed to something for 3 years. We want to find those short-term RIs, do a lot of tricks to maximize your savings, but keep that overall commitment window as short as possible. So we see a big benefit for that, not just over the next couple months, but over the next 3 years. Having that commitment window as short as possible really pays off in savings, assuming that all your workloads aren't 100% static and not going anywhere, because you have so much flexibility once you have that to change positions or to change your mind on anything that you're running today. Okay, so one other thing I just wanted to go over that's very kind of goes hand in hand when it comes to RIs and savings plans. We get asked a lot on, okay, well, we have these, whether one team is using it or another, how do we make sure that it's not just hitting one team's budget if they're not using it, but a different team is, or if you're buying them on the master payer, it's not just hitting IT's budget, and making sure that you can charge teams appropriately for what they're using. And it makes it a lot easier for teams to also see, okay, this is how much I'm saving. This is how much my stuff is actually costing me, because the way AWS does the billing might not be exactly how you want to account for the spend in each of the accounts. So this is a product that we have. I'd say it's a very, very cost-effective solution. We roll it out a lot with Eco in tandem, so that it's, here is all the savings we're generating for you. And then here's how you can account for it internally. This goes a long way to help finance or, the finance teams understand what's going on, be able to account for it while not getting kind of lost in the weeds or having to add a super long process to the month close or to kind of their existing billing process that they have today. One thing on this is we can support a lot of custom rules. It is a fully managed service as well. So I'll show a quick screenshot or two. There are some buttons, some things to click, but the goal is that we make it very, very simple to get up and going. Likewise, if there's any changes needed, we can help do that without, again, having to go learn it or test something out. That's something that we can help with. So I put this up here because sometimes one of the biggest hurdles to getting higher coverage in that is the rebilling process. Likewise, if you are, say, a single team in a shared, like your one linked account in a big master payer with a lot of other accounts, making sure that if you're doing a good job with your RIs and savings plans, you want to make sure that you're getting the most benefit possible. And then if someone else is using it, that they're paying their fair share. So it doesn't always have to be from a high level that this comes down. It can be individual teams who want to make sure that they're not paying for other teams' usage and that they get to kind of keep their own budget. So this is setting up workflows. These are some of the options that we have here that are kind of self-service. We can take EDPs into account, bulk discounts, making sure that the savings gets applied elsewhere, anything unused. It's very powerful, but also very simple to get going on day one. So I put that in here. It's not necessarily about saving money, but like I said, we see it as a common blocker to really get going is to get finance on board and make sure that they're very comfortable with the numbers. It just makes everything go a lot easier in the long run. Okay, so I did see a few questions come in. So if we want to go with those, we can start there. Please, guys, send questions. If you have a question, I guarantee everyone else does. I'll stay here as long as we need to make sure we can go through them all.
Yeah, excellent. So yes, as Patrick said, we have gotten some questions in, but there is plenty of time. If you have a question, please go ahead and get it on in. Let's go ahead and dive in with the questions that we do have. Let's see. Steve asked, one of the common cost-saving practices is to block of EU, UK accesses so that it reduces the cost of GDPR related costs and focus on only US. What is your comment on this?
So yes and no. It really depends on how you have your AWS environment structured. Generally we see even with GDPR, you'll have US and UK based accounts. If you have different product lines or different divisions, they still all roll up to the master payer. You don't need access where you'd be getting GDPR level data to be able to still save across the company. So that's one thing, at least with Eco, we look at basically the billing report and a few other pieces, but we're not getting user information or names or anything that is the most common things of GDPR, so that you can get savings across the board and not kind of exclude anyone. Because while it might seem simpler, usually you end up missing out on a ton of savings that way, and without compromising anything GDPR related, based on the limited data sets that you can operate with.
All right, great. Here's one from Kieran who asks, how is this different from Trusted Advisor? It does give recommendations based on metrics for under and overutilization.
So Trusted Advisor, you can definitely use that, same as like Cost Explorer. It's really going to depend on what you're able to do when that alert or underutilization metric comes in. Likewise, what did you do on day one so that you can account for this, or what is your relief valve if something does go underused, and then monitoring it all the time and making sure that everything is good to go. Not every time something goes underutilized, it doesn't necessarily mean get rid of it. If it's going to be very temporary, a couple days, probably hang on to it. But you do want to have that monitoring in place so that you can offload something very quickly. Every one RI that goes unused usually cancels out 3 or 4 other RIs. So it can be expensive in the sense that you lose a lot of savings by not addressing it quickly.
All right, guys, quick reminder, if there's plenty of time, if you do have a question for Patrick, you can go ahead and get it on in now. We do have a few minutes here for question and answer period. Here's another interesting question. Can non-US companies use the RA marketplace?
Good question. So AWS does have the requirement that you have to have a US bank account and US tax ID. So if non-US based companies, if they have that, they can definitely put it in. One thing that Eco does is we can provide a bank account and tax ID for free, so that you can leverage the marketplace. Honestly, we did that for international customers to help them out. We see a lot of US customers taking advantage of it because what we do is we would just give a credit on any invoice for anything sold in the marketplace, and it actually simplifies the discussion with finance significantly to do that. So yes, you do have to have a US bank account, but there are solutions to get around that.
Excellent. All right, great. Here's another interesting one. What happens if we turn off a lot of instances all at once?
So even in the very early days with Eco, we built our whole mentality around being reactive. So we assume that even if someone's trying very hard to tell us, we're turning off all of this or making a migration, even if they tell us, the day before, but let's say they can't or they don't or whatever happens, someone does it without informing anyone, we're going to react very quickly. That's why we focus on having a lot of it sellable. Making sure that we can convert stuff off, get rid of savings plans or RIs, whatever we need to make sure that the savings go or the utilization goes back up to 100% as quickly as possible. Likewise, if you're managing it yourself, making sure that you do have the different types, making sure that you can move things off. You're not fully committed with nothing to do or nowhere for that usage to go. I'm sorry, for the RIs to go if the usage does drop. So I'd say that's a very common scenario. And yes, you might get a couple days of underutilization, but if we're able to fix it quickly, you still saved, maybe for the other 6 months, the net savings is still significant.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Gotten some really great questions in so far. Let's see. What? Okay, here's one. What if the finance team needs to be involved? How does that work?
So that is a very common request. We can talk with finance, get any reports they need. Common one is around like amortization schedules, upfront amounts. So if there's any roadblock, let us know. We have custom reports we can deliver to make sure that they are in tune with everything that's going on.
Okay, great. All right, just going through these questions here because there's so many really great ones. Okay, how does it work with the RIs we already have?
So one thing with Eco, we don't try and take credit for anything that people have already done. So if we came in and did nothing, you would see a $0 bill from us. That is where we would just focus on what are the net new things we're able to bring. So easiest way to think about it is the start date is after we start. That's what we would be looking at. Likewise, if you are coming into an environment yourself and there's a bunch of things that are existing, usually you want to try and clean up house first before doing anything new, just to make sure you have all the options possible before you kind of get yourself in a position you might be overcommitted once you start cleaning up anything that's underutilized.
All right, great. All right, let's see. Here's a good one. How much work does my team still have to do if we use Eco?
So that is a very common question. Again, our goal is for it to be basically zero. For us, if you did know that something was going to change, shoot us a quick email. Say, hey, this M5 is switching to M6G here or in this account, and that'd be about it. The goal is really to not add any work to anyone's plate, other than tell us any big changes that are coming. That customer I showed you earlier with that savings chart, just to give you guys an idea, that was maybe 5 or 10 emails over a 2-year period for us to maintain that level of coverage and that level of utilization.
Okay, all right. Great. So quick time check. We are about 12 minutes to the top of the hour. So we do have a couple minutes here. Let's see. Kieran had another question here. What is the basis of Eco telling us recommendations?
So Eco, what we do is so good question. What is most helpful, we will get on a call, go over your usage, talk about it, come up with some savings estimates. So even if you just want, a third party to review, give you some suggestions, what you do is you'd set up a read-only access. We're going to look at your cost and usage report, get the historical data, look at that. So that is really what we're going to be looking at. And then we take that, blend it with all of the other data that we have to know, okay, even for short-term workloads, this is what options we have internally to try and maximize your savings. even though you have to get rid of it in 4 months or 5 months or whatever it might be. And then we will come back with some estimates there to show you what we think we can do.
Okay, great. Here's another one, and Deepak is asking, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm asking it correctly, but the question is, what efficient spot is for Kubernetes?
One thing we can do with Kubernetes with Ocean is make sure the right sizing piece is one that people really like. So monitor the memory and CPU utilization. Maybe have different types, a different mix of instance types based on the different workloads. And then obviously scaling down when you're not needing as many, scaling back up. The big benefit though is just running that on spot. You get that huge discount with absolutely zero commitment. We do have SLAs around our uptime there. So I'd say the vast majority of people who are using Ocean or Elastic Group is in production in mission critical systems.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no need to have any concern there. Yeah, so let me know if that answers it or if you need anything else.
Awesome. Okay, great. Here's another great question for you. When we enter this agreement, do we have a minimum commitment with Spot and the relationship?
So Spot Eco does look at, say, we want to look at 1, 2, 3 years out. So we will have generally a 1-year contract with most people. We can see how that does or doesn't make sense. We can definitely do month to month in other areas. But the goal is, we're going to lay out a bunch of different options, see what kind of what makes sense for you, what you want to do, and we're very happy to kind of work around any specific requirements that people have. So I would say let us talk about it, understand your exact use case. My whole goal with Eco and all the products that I manage is to just save as much money as humanly possible. That's the overarching thing. Every customer, we want to find as much savings as we possibly can, regardless of anything else. So just know that that is the number one goal that all of our team looks at. All the tooling that we build out is really to save as much as we possibly can.
All right, great. I think we have time for a couple more questions here. Keep coming in. Let's see. The next question here is, okay, here's one. Do these services cover RDS and other serverless solutions?
Yes. So yeah, I forgot to mention that. We can look at, you have your common ones, RDS, Elasticache, Elasticsearch / OpenSearch now. Redshift, you have Dynamo. Let us know if there's anything you want us to look at. Basically, if there is an RI or kind of capacity discount that we can get for you, we will.
All right, great. Let's see. Hold on, guys. I have lots and lots of questions here that I'm going through and making sure that we're covering all of our bases here. Let's see. Okay, so is it correct that you can do an evaluation for free, and what level of access do you need for that evaluation?
Yeah, so that's the evaluations are definitely free. There's obviously no charge or commitment or anything, and so we again, you would just go into Eco on the Spot console. It takes about 5 minutes to run a CloudFormation script just on your management account or master payer account. Let us look at the billing data. Just anyone who's security minded on this call, I will say our permissions are very locked down by design. We have very, very few issues with any type of security review you might need, but it's read only, so it's usually not much of a concern in the beginning. And then we would analyze it, come back to numbers, or go over the numbers with you on a call, so that you would know exactly what we're looking at, what we see as the opportunity, or if there's any specific issues you want to address or use cases. That's where we can go over it and then see what we can do to help you with those. And just on that, I was going to say, because I saw one ask, this is our email address. We can still keep doing Q&A, but just to put it up there, it's eco@NetApp. And that way that'll go directly to us. Or if you want to, just go on our website, hit the chat button. You can talk with someone in about 30 seconds and go over any questions you have or set up a call to do anything you need to.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we have time for one more question. Here's a good one. How does the billing work between Spot and the company? I ask because of upfront buying.
So we can work. That is a good question. Upfront buying, upfront amounts are generally one of the things that people get stuck on, especially with finance and getting things approved. With Eco specifically, we're able to operate with kind of 95% less upfront budget than you typically look at with it getting stuff straight from Amazon. A lot of that is going to be used in the marketplace, but we can work around any upfront budget we need to. Usually there's a threshold, below X dollars, finance doesn't really care. And that's where we can set it. And then if we do see an opportunity or something we'd want to get more of, we would just set up a quick call, go over it, and see if we do want to temporarily or permanently raise that. But it would be up to you to decide exactly how much you want to put there. And just on that, the billing between you and AWS stays exactly the same. It's still going through your account, your EDP. We take all of that into account. So there's nothing that changes from kind of the billing or organizational level structure with your AWS accounts.
All right. All right. Well, we are about 4 minutes to the top of the hour. So unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for questions. And I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions. There were a lot of good ones, and I know we didn't get to them all, and I do apologize for that. Please know that that Patrick and his crew over at Spot are going to get a copy of all of the questions that came in, and I'm sure somebody from the organization will be more than happy to follow up with you offline and get your question answered. Just another quick reminder that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following the webinar today, we are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website. So you can always go look for it there as well. You can just go to DevOps.com/webinars and look in the on demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, before we close things out for today's webinar, I did want to do the $425 Amazon gift card drawing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. Our first winner today is Gang Y. Congratulations, Gang. Our second winner today is Adrian B. Congratulations, Adrian. Our third winner today is Bianca P. Congratulations, Bianca. And our fourth and final winner today is Vasanta T. Congratulations, Vasanta. We will be following up with all four of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please do check your inbox. And if you don't see anything there, please check your spam folder. Patrick, what a great conversation, great presentation. Really do appreciate your time, chock full of some good information there. So, and judging from the amount of questions that came in from the audience, I know they got a lot out of it as well. So thank you so much. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.